Well, here we are on Halloween. So happy Halloween, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is the fourth in our series of Ctrl+Alt+Comply, SIP in the cloud. Um, and I'm sorry about the sticker shock. You're all expecting to see my good friend Tim Conway here. Guess what? Tim got called away in an urgent matter, which is not unusual for Tim. It happens in his life and in his world. We all appreciate Tim and his contributions. I've known Tim since, gosh, I think I've told the story a few times. We hired Tim as an intern when I was an EMS engineer in 1998. And in 6 months, my boss, Frank, looked at me and said, that kid's going to be our boss someday. And yes, that's what really came to pass. So, Tim, sorry you can't be here today, but we have a really great webinar planned today. You can see who's on the panel with us today. First of all, in the background, you see Lou Folkers sitting there, and this is just a testament to Tim. It takes at least a couple of us to fill in Tim's shoes. So hi, Lou, and Lou is here as the founder of the CTAG, the Cloud Technology Advisory Group. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But with us today, we've got our great friend Maggie Powell from Amazon Web Services and Mikhail Falkovich from Microsoft. And having these two folks talk to us today is really a great thing. We have Microsoft and Amazon, both cloud service providers. Both of these folks have roots in our industry. Many of us know Maggie from when she was at Exelon and when she was the chair of the drafting team. She was a participant in the version 5 transition advisory group. She was very involved with the changes that need to be made. So she's very attuned to our industry and a SIP expert. So great to have her with Amazon Web Services. And similarly for Mikhail, many years in our industry. I believe you were the CISO at Con Ed back in the day. Mikhail, we'll talk a little bit more when we get to them. I'm sorry we can't be there in person. I have the full-size candy I would throw out to you if I could, but there's no virtual way to do that. But so today I'm your ghost host. I live 3 miles from the Magic Kingdom in Orlando, Florida, so I have my Haunted Mansion wallpaper on just to help set the tone, and you can see our two presenters in the background are ready for that as well. But let's jump into this. Move to the next slide, Lou, would you please? And we will be monitoring questions in the chat, so feel free to submit some questions. If we don't get to you, we've got them, and we'll get them out there along with the recording when we post the recording, and you'll have the slide deck as well. So where did this thing come from? Why are we here today? Well, thanks to my friend Lou, a couple of years ago, saw the need for a transition advisory group, just like we had with the SIP version 5 transition advisory group. We needed a group of stakeholders who were involved in this, the experts in SIP, the experts in compliance, the experts in the technology, our industry folks, and that's who we have on this Cloud Technology Advisory Group. We have consultants, we have our cloud service providers like Mikhail and Maggie, we have Tim Conway, we have regional folks from the directors of compliance to some of our regions to Lou and I, who both work for regions. Lou works for Reliability First. I'm an advisor for CERC. So we have a whole batch of industry participants from registered entities, large and small, on the CTAG. And this was really an important thing that we've got folks, and I'm going to steal Tim's term. He calls this the coalition of the willing. Maggie and Mikhail aren't here this is not a sales pitch for you. We had our application service providers last time talking about in the last webinar, people from Splunk, from Network Perceptions, from GE Vernova, talking about their perceptions and their driving forces to cloud from the application provider point of view. Today we have the cloud service provider point of view. So it's these folks are all volunteering their time to help. And in the intervening time, since Lou started this technology advisory group, we now have a drafting team stood up to help us in the NERC CIP world with this, because we know what the challenges are. The very first webinar was the driving forces toward cloud. Lou and I did that together. Again, they're all recorded. So if you'd like to go back and take a look at the earlier ones, and we still have 2 left. Next slide, Lou. There we go. So industrial cloud integration. Well, you know what? There are so many use cases. There are so many driving forces toward cloud in the industrial control system space, which is why we're all here. Lots of industry already leaping on that bandwagon, already there, already taking advantages of some of the things cloud can provide. We in the electric industry, we have a few more challenges for that. Go to the next slide, Lou. And again, we're all familiar with this stack. We've seen this a lot of times. Notice on the left side, that's where we have all been for years and years and years. In fact, in my company, we kept that little stack on the left so tight, we didn't let our corporate IT touch it. They couldn't even come in the door. So it was an OT group, period, keeping the locks on that. The thought of ever putting something like, well, any of those use cases or applications in the cloud would have shocked us to the core a few years ago. So other industries rocketed across these options, are already over to software as a service. Not so easy for us. We're in the baby step world. We're going to talk about that more. You're going to hear more from both Maggie and Michaela on this. Next slide, Lou. And again, the yes and no. Yeah, there are yeses and nos for this in our world. Look on the right on the bottom. Control from the cloud. We're going to put our control systems in the cloud. Well, it's already happening from some of our vendors. OSI has a product called eSCADA. So these things are already in progress, already in play. Do the standards allow everybody to move to that right side of this right now? I think we'll get more of that answer in a few minutes when we turn it over to these two. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to turn it over to our 2 presenters today. And again, Maggie, I think your title today is Security Assurance Principal Industry Specialist. Do I have that right? Is that?
Yep, you got it. It's a mouthful.
It's a lot of words, Maggie. And Mikhail, you're a customer security officer, right? So is your focus primarily on security? Is that your whole focus?
So if you can imagine, I provide advisory services for customers and Microsoft and partners on security topics. Yes.
Okay, well, that's great. And I appreciate the Wizard app. That helps us a lot today. And Maggie, I don't know what's going on with that hat of yours.
I'm the QR code.
Oh, do we scan that?
I'm not clicking there. I'm not.
It's actually the QR code for feedback from recent presentations. So if you were at GridSecCon and you didn't send us feedback, go ahead.
And I did see Maggie last week. For those of you who weren't there, GridSecCon is a terrific conference. It was in Minneapolis last week, and it's where grid security professionals come to the table and play. And Maggie, I appreciated your presentation. We had a 4-hour training session with you last week on these topics. So it's great when you have, again, that coalition of the willing. We're all in this. I mean, each of you guys can talk about this. What brought you to the CTAG and why are you here donating your time, which is extremely valuable. I know that. So let's turn it over to you guys. I'm going to turn off my camera and mute myself, and you guys take over.
That sounds great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks so much for the introductions. And yeah, this is an opportunity for Mikhail and I to share some of our insights. There is a lot going on, and so we appreciate the opportunity to reach out to everyone. First, let's dive in and take a look at how have we gotten here where we are. Well, let's take a look at the NERC CIP of the past. Certainly the NERC CIP standards have had a pretty long history, and certainly a very active history. I mean, version 1 was approved in 2008, and by 2013, FERC was approving version 5. And we all recall version 5 and the major expansion of requirements that represented. And the revisions have marched on. But throughout these revisions, some of the foundations have remained, and some of them are now, I guess, up in the queue to be addressed. The standards were developed before cloud was really considered. They're very individually device-centric. And in spite of the efforts to change, they change to a system orientation. The requirements really emphasize assets rather than a holistic system approach. And of course, there are so many different interpretations, really not just for virtualization, but virtualization being kind of the latest latest challenge knocked down, but particularly for virtualization, in particular, its connection now, its leapfrog to cloud. The language right now has created a trend towards a prescriptive approach, and some of that is based on those interpretations and the risk that comes with that a little bit. So there's definitely a prescriptive leaning, and while the regulatory obligations of the CIP standards have increased focus on security, and they've mobilized investment, can't deny that, but much of that investment has been steered towards demonstrating compliance and managing audit. So not mentioning these to be extra critical, it's really opportunities for lessons learned as we've all really coalesced the intent and the language of the CIP standards to apply to our security programs. But the work, it has continued to evolve and continue to do so. Next slide. Mikhail, let me have you take this one away.
Sure thing. And Maggie, to your previous slides and previous comments, I just want to say that the needs of the grid, right, the needs of our customers evolved as well. And so what happens is with the new deployments in the cloud of new vendors, new technologies, new capabilities that actually make the grid more reliable and more resilient, right? We need to both look to the present in terms of what's available to us, but also look to the future to say, hey, there is going to be more adoption of cloud that's going to be necessary to enable us to provide that safe, reliable, and resilient service for our customers on the electric front. So let's talk about where we are today, right? So NERC CIP exists today in pretty much the same mindset that Maggie mentioned, where it is extremely restrictive and very much on-prem focused. But there are instances where cloud can be utilized for the benefit of the utility, for the benefit of the customer, for the benefit of resiliency and reliability, specifically when it comes to data analytics, right? If we're thinking about those types of information that we can bring up from an operational perspective and talk about predictive maintenance, load forecasting, right? Databases of assets and of all the different functions that are being performed for the benefit of the business and for the benefit of reliability, those already exist and are being utilized to good effect, right? Whether it's artificial intelligence or just different applications that are built specifically and only in the cloud environments. When we actually mix in the information that is best cyber system information, it becomes a little bit more challenging, but it still can be achieved as long as we maintain very tight access and encrypt the data effectively within those cloud environments. And then you can actually do more analytics specifically for security or IT functionality. That being said, it becomes still very difficult to actually do strong security protections such as endpoint detection and response or extended detection and response, because in those instances, then we bring in other controls and other requirements into place, which are very, very difficult to achieve in the cloud environments of today. The good news is there's still plenty of assets and plenty of environments which do fit the mold where we can use cloud solutions for that. And those fall into the low impact systems or distribution or even advanced metering infrastructure. If we think about the advanced metering infrastructure, and where Chris actually mentioned it earlier, hey, do we have control systems in the cloud? Guess what? If you're going to go after an AMI solution, right, an advanced metering infrastructure solution in today's environment, it will be a cloud provided solutions more likely than not. I think there are very, very few on-prem capabilities that exist right now. And the standards allow for it because they're below the bright line criteria, right, for either low or medium impact. But we have to be careful on the distribution mindset, right? Sometimes the requirements in the standards, whether it's for load shedding or special protection systems and other conditions, which may bring in those distributed or distribution entities into that cloud environment. And there's one other type of asset that I want to mention, right? It's distributed energy resources. There are plenty of resources on the grid, again, to support our current needs and to support the future needs of the grid, right? So that kind of grid of the future mindset, which we must rely on. A lot of them, inclusive even today's demand response capabilities, rely on aggregators, and the aggregators exist in the cloud. Those entities actually then dispatch and operate those resources at scale. So all of those conditions rely on cloud technologies to both communicate, make decisions, and in some instances even do control for those particular functions. Let's go to the next slide.
Perfect. Yeah, and the move to BCSI, a revision of that language, I think, was a marked change to the thinking behind it. And for all those reasons that Mikhail just cited, the landscape, the operational landscape is changing, and it's requiring, as the technology and those operations change, so do the needs and the demands that technology is available for our everyday operations. So what's happening in the future? Well, yeah, we have a drafting team has stood up and the work continues. And there is the new revision project, and with that comes new opportunities. So when you look at the different systems, and we talk a lot about OT systems, which in general, which we know really are composed of different sets of requirements, operational requirements. They have different demands and needs. I kind of break them down in general into supporting systems and controlling systems. And on the supporting system side, industry really has a growing experience with cloud-based supporting systems for those workloads outside of CIP scope, like what Mikhail was mentioning, on the distribution side, and even in like the asset classification and lows and stuff. So there is that growing experience, and there is seeing the value of those expanded capabilities and the speed of the cloud versions. And this has prompted industry to really seek to unblock the language that's kind of in the way for the use of cloud for those in-scope systems. These are the systems that have built the momentum behind the SAR to revise the standards. The other factor, though, with these providers for the security service providers, they're also moving away from those on-prem versions because of the benefits that cloud offers, such as that ability to manage those greater volumes of data. The DERMS scenario is a perfect one in seeing that those managing, maintaining, get the greatest value out of that growing data volumes. Cloud is an important, essential part of that calculation. But it's also the scalability, the agility, and then cost savings is always a factor. But very significantly, applications like your security information and event monitoring, which would be classified as an EACMS, your physical access controls, obviously, which would be a PACS. They can use cloud resources to expand the insights, the analysis, the responsiveness, all of our security professionals that are looking after those critical systems. And then it comes to the controlling systems. Want to dive a little deeper, Mikhail?
Sure thing. And before I switch over there, you mentioned SIEM and endpoint protection solutions, right? So if we think about those two particular solutions, I just wanted to highlight something. Great. A lot of the IT shops out there are moving all of the SIEM capability into the cloud, both for intelligence, signaling, data analytics, and automation, right? All of those functions that exist in the cloud are much, much tougher to create just in a separate on-prem instance. So if we think about the risk of operating your SIEM and centralized orchestration on-prem versus moving the data out to the cloud to actually get those benefits of scale, benefits of immediate notifications, there is tremendous value of having the ability to do either, right? The risk of moving data and losing data in the cloud, as small of a risk as it is actually a higher risk to the reliability of any organization in today's world than not doing it, right? we must utilize the capabilities that we've built and have now kind of relied on for many years to enable us to do better from a security perspective for our customers. All right, let's talk about controlling systems. So not just on the supportive systems, but even on the controlling systems, there are use cases where having cloud control it can be very worthwhile, specifically when it comes to the types of risks that those assets exist, right? If we're talking about very critical control centers that control the flow of transmission across key junctions, right? Those are probably still targeted for on-prem environments, and that's how the standards are written, and I'm completely aligned with that. But for those instances where the risk of the asset is limited, such as, let's say, renewable generation, whether it's for wind or for solar, where the scale of controlling those assets in the cloud actually enables those companies to make money and provide those reliable services, I hope that the NERC CIP standards of the future will allow for a little bit more of a risk mindset to enable those types of assets to be controlled in a cloud environment. Many organizations right now actually will start out controlling their, let's say, generation remotely, and then there's a certain 1500 megawatt barrier when they reach that actually changes their whole operating structure. To change the operating structure and to now go into that medium and high impact compliance environment actually significantly changes how they can operate their assets effectively and efficiently. And so we're going to get reliability. There's a reliability risk of using cloud, and then there's a reliability risk of not using cloud. That's kind of my point, is we just need to be able to negotiate that conversation. Now, Maggie also mentioned a lot about virtualization. I've always been a fan of virtualizing within security domains, right? So if I have my control center and my control plane, that's one virtualization space. The supporting systems where I have EACMS, PACS, that can be another one, right? And then IT is highly virtualized all around. In the future, right, we need to think about those concepts of switches, file servers, timing, all of those capabilities as both existing on-prem in those separate kind of silos, but also having the ability to spin them up very, very quickly in the cloud for a couple of purposes. Think about a digital twin condition where you may want to test your patching, you may want to test your rollouts and test your environments before actually bringing it down into that OT space that is on-prem. But additionally, think about the recovery capability, right? So right now, all of us are trained to think about recovery and recovering from a gold image, let's say, on our on-prem control system environment. But how much more effective would it be if we also had either a tertiary cloud capability where we would bring up the control system in the cloud, or just being able to use a cloud environment as that digital twin in case of emergencies, in case of those black sky events. Those capabilities are very, very worthwhile to the long-term reliability and resiliency of the grid.
Mm-hmm. Hey, just to add to that, I know, in many respects, we're focused on the requirement language, but what Mikhail is describing, the opportunity is to really understand what are your resilience needs and the decisions that you need to make about what those systems need for redundancy, for failover, and how much they need, and where cloud can really augment those needs. So it is an opportunity to kind of reassess your systems and really understand how to build in operational resilience around things like what are the operational requirements, what are the recovery time objectives, and those concepts are really important to consider even in the regulatory context, because those system attributes will inform your risk management and your mitigation approaches.
Agreed. And even in today's world, when we're thinking about the NERC CIP of today, there may be an opportunity to utilize the cloud environment for those black sky events when we are under NERC CIP exceptional circumstances, right? So don't necessarily write it off as an option. It can be an option, provided the hopefully not, but provided that the right conditions exist for its utilization. There is still value there even today, but in the future, we can make it even more valuable to our operational environments.
So Mikhail, I'm going to jump in for a second. I've got a question for both of you. As we talk about this, you've thrown a bunch of cases at the wall here. Is there anything our entities should consider today for cloud adoption? What can they do right now? Should they be considering something or moving towards something, or are you seeing that happening with entities you deal with? Yeah, regulated use cases. I mean, is there anything out there that we should consider, or they should start considering for adoption now?
Okay, I'll go first.
Sure.
So the number one use case of cloud adoption is data analytics, right? For both predictive maintenance, right, and operational efficiencies, and ensuring that, again, the system operates in a reliable way. So if we do not put any of the best cyber system information into the cloud, there is a clear architecture that can be designed to move the data from the OT environment into the IT environment and into the cloud environment to actually utilize that massive computing and analytical capability of the cloud to make business decisions, right? It is also very useful to create those workflows between and within entities, right? To make sure that we interface with the customer, we interface with the regulators, we interface with the reliability coordinators, we interface with the DER and other entities that rely and attach to the grid, right? The cloud is actually an existential part of those connections, because we cannot do it just from, let's say, an on-prem and a direct path anymore, right? Yeah, Maggie, do you have another use case?
Yeah, no, I would I guess I would build upon that, because analytics, I agree with you. That's an intuitive place to really take advantage of it. I would encourage folks to move forward on BCSI and the cloud and building those use cases where they can adopt BCSI. There's lots of them. I mean, the one that's very intuitive is under CIP 9. Your media backup and recovery are useful ways to augment that system. The analytics is a prime example, and I think there's already a lot of movement there. But by getting that experience, that's how you start the journey. And I guess I would also say, start looking forward, start talking to your cross-functional teams, talk with those that are responsible for those support systems, your teams, start talking with those responsible for those supporting systems to look forward. Because, I mean, this industry, we very attuned to planning things a year ahead, 2 years ahead, 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. We have things that have been around for 30 years and 50 years. So taking the longer view to see where quite frankly, where your vulnerabilities are, where your replacement opportunities are coming, and consider the different opportunities that cloud can provide and help augment those services.
Yeah, and I'll mention one more, digital twin. I said it before, but I'll say it again. So the ability to actually replicate your environment in the cloud can be tremendously valuable, right? So as long as we can do it in a way that doesn't, or at least protects our best CSI in the cloud, those digital twins can provide a lot of insight and a lot of operational benefits to any organization.
Well, and speaking from the regional perspective, we know that CIP 4 and CIP 11 were changed to accommodate BCSI in the cloud. We know that entities were given an early adoption ability to do that. We are still seeing a fair amount of reluctance from our registered entities. I don't know if it's a combination of compliance fear and maybe security fear. Are they a little worried about putting their BCSI in the cloud from a reliability and security point of view, or more from a compliance point of view? I'm not really sure of the answer to that, but I guess, how can we help encourage our entities that this is an okay thing? And I can offer folks like our team. I work in the outreach and assist team at CERC. You can reach out to us, and the same with my partner Lou Folkerth at RF. You can reach out to your region and ask some questions. The CTAG has people like the two of you, has other registered entity participants that we can maybe work as a group help overcome some of that reluctance. I mean, I think it's very doable. I just think it's a new and shiny thing that people are just a little afraid to jump off that diving board in right now.
I'll comment on that. I mean, I think entities have a rich history of compliance audits, the good, the bad, the ugly. And so it's entering new territory there's always a little extra caution associated with that. But actually, Mikhail already said it, as far as bringing together all your internal folks to understand how to securely and compliantly adopt cloud, and to reach out to the audit community through the mechanisms that do exist, things like the assist visits. Because everybody's on the learning curve. And I know there's always speculation and concerns that go around. It's really important to drill down more specifically on what is the risk that is not clearly being addressed, or what is the compliance language that is concerning, and work out ways to get around that. Because really the intent of those revisions, and at least NERC Central has said this, and I think you all have said it before too, the intent of those revisions is to allow for cloud adoption. So want to do what we can to help support marching forward on that.
Yeah, and
sorry for the ghost host interruption, you guys. I'll put you back on your track.
No, Chris, it's a great question. And to add to Maggie's comments, as a CISO of Con Edison, when we were talking about new ways to actually meet the regulations that were actually coming out, and even in the case of TCAs, we actually engaged NPCC to say, hey, this is what we're planning on doing, something new, something that was not done before. So the regulator was very, very much on the same page with us, and fully understood what we were planning to do, fully understood our risks, and yet fully enabled us to do that program, which is still running today. And in my even past lives, I don't know how often I called Lou, but it was quite often to discuss potential new regulatory interpretations and capabilities. We have to work with our regulators to enable us to achieve those goals in that safe, reliable, secure, and compliant manner.
Totally great. Actually, that's a perfect segue to the next slide.
All right. Thanks, Maggie. All right. So I'll quickly run through this, and those that have seen me present previously, you've heard me talk about achievable, effective, and efficient standards. And when we're talking about regulations, I'm always looking to get value, right? I'm looking to get value for the regulator, for the customer, for the entity themselves. Because if we are encouraging bad behaviors with the language that we write in the standards, then there's no added value. Ideally, we want to get value from the regulations that are written. So there are three main tenets that I wanted to highlight, right? Regulations should be achievable. And that means that as an entity, right, if I'm a regulated entity, I want to be able to actually achieve the requirements as written, right? Sometimes I've seen instances where, as written, that requirement may have potentially taken me as an entity out of business. Luckily, those did not actually materialize into enforceable standards, but that has been seen before. So let's say that now I can achieve this, I can achieve the requirement. The second part of it is those requirements need to be effective. So if I achieve the letter of the law, the letter of the standard, then I want to make sure that I'm actually achieve the intent, because sometimes achieving the letter of the law is not necessarily the intent of NERC CIP standards. And I'm sure that there's still some entities out there today that utilize dial-up networking as a mechanism to communicate between their control center and their remote field assets, just so that they avoid the use of externally routable protocols, right, in the connectivities. The idea is, I don't think that was the intent, right? We want to make sure that the standards as written actually promote new technology adoption, like the cloud as well, and yet provide that effective output of more resiliency, more security, more capability for the entities. And then the third kind of main tenet is having the standards be efficient. So that means that if it costs me $5 million to comply with the standard to achieve, let's say, I don't know, $50 worth of benefit, I'm being facetious here a little bit, but the idea is the money spent should be reasonable. It shouldn't be an undue burden. So now I'm going to talk about kind of the forward thinking, right? So these were not included in my thinking previously, but it is absolutely crucial based on what I've seen happen with regulations. And by the way, regulations are continuously evolving now, not just NERC CIP, but focusing on other asset types and other industries as well. It is crucial to have the regulatory functions be well scoped, whether it's based on risk, whether it's based on type of asset, whether it's data or asset related, right? Whether it's cloud or on-prem capabilities or a particular segment, right? If we don't scope the standards well, it can actually get very expensive or sometimes inefficient or sometimes not achievable. So the scoping really drives to those three outcomes. The next conversation is the standards need to be able to move with the technology adoption. The growth in technological solutions and the growth in just technology options to achieve our objectives is almost vertical. It's exponential. So we need to create those patterns and mechanisms to ensure that our regulations, as we write them, come with a process to be able to adjust as necessary. So right now, as an example, AMI is only in the cloud space, right? Sometime in the future, maybe some of the control center environments would also only exist in the cloud space because that's where the vendors may take it. The idea is we need to figure out how do we take the standards and the requirements and make sure that as technology evolves, the standards evolve with it, and not to have too much of a delay of, let's say, 3 to 5 years between the adoption of new technology and the follow-up of the standards, because then we actually incur risk on our environment as we fall behind in our technological adoptions. Mm-hmm. And finally, the last bullet is harmonization. There are many, many entrants into regulation space today, right? Between CISA, between TSA, between NERC, between SEC, there are so many regulatory requirements out there that drive cybersecurity programs for many, many companies. We need to make sure that whatever the standards and the regulations that we come up with, they are harmonized across. Because if they're not, then either conditions of double jeopardy or conditions of actual conflict arise, where I may meet this requirement, but I may fail another requirement by doing the same exact thing. So that harmonization is crucial to our success to, again, maintain a safe, reliable, and secure industry.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to underscore a few of those points too, because I mean, Mikhail and I have been around this space for a while and been on both sides of it. And even the drafting team project that has stood up really is an opportunity to learn from the work of the past and from those other regulatory approaches, because there are, globally, there are some other models that have had the advantage of building upon what NERC has done and iterated and evolved. So taking advantage of that leapfrog effect can be very valuable. And I know folks roll their eyes at me when I say things like, security should really be driving the investment in the prioritization and compliance should follow. And that really is how it should be, even if at the moment compliance is still driving behaviors. But regulations can play a valuable role in supporting best practices and incentivizing robust and consistent security measures. But as Mikhail has kind of pointed out, to do so, they really do need to be well designed. The words I would use, which are very consistent with this, are just, it needs to be actionable. It needs to be understandable. Entities need to understand what is expected and how to demonstrate compliance, and then it needs to be auditable. Because at their worst, they set a minimum bar and they distract security professionals from the security work. And in particular, that harmonization piece, you have a set of security professionals responsible for all the security controls. And if you have multiple compliance obligations associated with it, it's the same group of security people that are getting those requests. And that at its worst can be distracting. And you really want to work hard to protect that. make sure it's augmenting their security effort, not really getting in the way of it. And that's a challenge because regulating security can be awkward. It's security regulations, for them to be effective, we really want them to incentivize good practices, but traditionally as a tool set, it's more punitive through that weight of audits and compliance risk and penalties. So I guess we're calling this out to remind us, ultimately the goal for all of us is for requirements to improve security. And it is a team effort. It's industry's engagement, and which the NERC structure enables a great voice from those that are in the field. But it is also the auditor community kind of coming together and recognizing the value of clarifying expectations, enabling entities to do it right, and minimizing, I know you hear this all the time, could we minimize the compliance burden? But there really are opportunities to streamline and even streamlining things and validating controls up front. So it's an opportunity to kind of dig deep, be a little more creative.
And I want to jump back to that first bubble there, the achievable bubble. It's important that I think maybe some folks on the call don't really understand that our standards are driven by industry. The standard drafting teams are industry driven. So industry gets to participate in, really, for the most part, gets to write their own regulations. So the more involvement we have from industry people on that, the better. Maggie, you're living proof of this. When you were with Exxon, you not only were on the team, you chaired the team. And these standards are not easy. They're not easy to write. But the other thing to mention about the standard drafting teams, the meetings that they have are open. So anybody can listen in, and the standards drafting teams usually welcome input and participation from folks, even if you're not a formal member of the drafting team. We are lucky in this drafting team. This is a new drafting team that just began just a few weeks ago. We're lucky that 2 members of the CTAG are on this drafting team. Lou Folkerth himself is one of the members of the drafting team, so we have regional representation along with industry. Hey, Lou. And the other thing we have in this drafting team is one of your colleagues, Maggie, from Amazon, Lindsay Hale, is actually a member of the drafting team. So having a cloud service provider perspective being part of building the standard, I think it helps find that balance that Mikhail kept talking about for this. You guys who are cloud service providers, your systems. We can't have standards that just go off the deep end, and cannot be effective, cannot be efficient. Lou, you want to weigh in on that drafting team a little bit?
Sure, I can confirm that the drafting team listens to all voices. If you're dialed in and you want to speak, you're allowed to speak. And we will listen. We don't promise to take everything that you say is gospel, but that applies to drafting team members as well. It's a consensus building effort. And so, yeah, we welcome fresh voices, especially.
And the chair and vice chair are both from industry, right, Lou, of the drafting team?
Yeah, except for me, everybody else on the team, except for me and Lindsay, who you mentioned, everybody else on the team is from industry.
Okay, that's good to know. Mikhail?
Yeah, I was going to say that in my past life, I would tag along to whenever Maggie would schedule her drafting team meetings. I would like randomly show up around the country, and then I would absolutely participate in the discussion. So, Chris, what you are highlighting is absolutely something worthwhile for members of the industry to do. No question.
Yep, Mikhail, I think you ended up with assignments to work with different task groups to help vet out language. So yeah, you were one of us, absolutely.
And keeping the dialogue open with our providers, both you guys as cloud service providers and our application providers, like I mentioned, the GEs and the Splunks and the ServiceNows of the world, our products that we use in our industry that so many registered entities use. The Ecams is another great example of and SEAMs are products that we all use. So keeping that dialogue open so we don't get stranded. That was one of the best things I heard in webinar 3. Those 3 application providers are not stranding anybody. They are promising they're going to give you one solution only, and that's in the cloud, knowing we might not be able to make that work with our current CIP standards. So I like to hear that assurance. I like to hear that folks like you guys are dialed right into this and to the drafting team. So I think I view that as a great optimistic process for us. So keep those dialogues open and get involved. So sorry, back to your next slide. Sorry, you guys.
No, I think that's a good transition to the next one, because and I think this might be our last slide in here, but this is our transition to really deep dive. Like, this, why do we feel so that this is so important right now? Well, you know what? I'll reiterate. Mikhail and I, we know what it's like to be responsible for security of our critical systems. We've both been, and not to put words in your mouth, Mikhail, but we've both been climbing the learning curve about cloud technology. And I'll speak for myself. I remember the seriousness of the security task, and I also wish I had some of the capabilities that I've learned about cloud providing when I was in that position. So we do see the opportunities to really support security, reduce some of those risks that cloud can offer. And we had, so we kind of broke it down into 4 buckets here today. There are more, but these I think are big ones. And they're very approachable. And I'll underscore, cloud gives you additional options to reduce risks. It's not a wholesale one or the other. These are options to help build out and mesh into your operations. And so in considering the best way for you to use cloud, first, I'd like you to challenge your assumptions about how cloud really works. It may actually be very different than how it works in your on-prem approaches. It may resolve some of the intractable issues that you may have on-prem. And of course, it opens up new aspects that require learning how to manage and maintain. In that same exercise, I'd ask you to take a real introspective look about the vulnerabilities that you have and what your current options are to mitigate those risks, and think about other mitigation options that would really be valuable to resolve or to at least manage those vulnerabilities. Again, the cloud resources really open up a new world of options to address those vulnerabilities and reduce those risks. Distribute workloads. So this one, it really kind of reflects back on our infrastructure opportunities. So you've probably heard me talk about this in the past if you've come to any of our other presentations, but entities build in redundancy and failover for your operational systems to support all that uptime. And this can also be done to an expanded degree with cloud resources. So if you think about it, on-prem, typically you have a primary and a backup data center. And we all know there's unfortunate scenarios where both data centers end up, say, in the same storm path or some other scenario. So exploring cloud infrastructure can allow those workloads and those systems to be distributed across multiple data centers in multiple regions, geographically dispersed. And that in and of itself can reduce the impact of a single point of failure or attack. When it comes to automation, I mean, automation is, I think, one of the most exciting aspects of cloud, because it really expands your capabilities beyond what you can do on-prem. Security automation for security remediations can avoid those potential consequences of undesirable conditions. You can speed recovery by rebuilding environments. We talk a lot about use of scripts and infrastructure as code to be able to quickly rebuild an environment that may need rebuilding for whatever reason. It also expands the opportunity for machine-to-machine maintenance, which that can remove humans. So that the infrastructure as code is great because it can reduce the potential for human error, but machine-to-machine maintenance can actually remove humans from some functions, which can increase the security for those. No human would need to see certain content to perform the function. So it can actually eliminate the need for human access. And of course, patching, there's so much opportunity for simplifying patching. And I like to dive into like the brilliance of immutable infrastructure. So to patch using cloud, you don't have to touch your production system. You can create a clone, you can run the patch, you can test it. And then when it's ready, you can make it production. It's fast, efficient, and you always still have the original because it's immutable. And that helps de-risk patching. So there's other opportunities within there. Mikhail, you might have a few to add. And then, of course, we've got some other deeper dive opportunities.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maggie. Completely agree with you. And to your points earlier, right, even when we talk about security risk, right, we can even bring that down just a little bit more to say it's the operational risk of security. It's the integration risk of security. Cloud scale and cloud automation, cloud analytics can really help us achieve more with the limited resources that we have, right? We have to think about how many resources the utility industry and the energy space has to actually achieve all of those security objectives. So cloud is absolutely a mechanism for us to drive that risk down. And then the two items that we have on the right, so near real-time observability. So I want to highlight the fact that whichever solution that you pick, right, if you don't have the signals that exist from the rest of the world that are actually piped into those solutions in the cloud, then we are not necessarily doing our best to do the proper analytic to actually understand what's going on in our environment. So we need to not only observe what we have, but also have that information in context with what's going on with the rest of the world. And it's very, very difficult to do that when you do not utilize those large-scale data analytics cloud environments. And so, again, I'm going to raise the question, is the risk of not using cloud higher than the potential risk of losing that, let's say, interesting data or sensitive data? And I would argue that in today's world, we need to do the analytics for security to make our critical assets more secure so that we can monitor better and we can do better in those protections. There's actually another thing that Maggie mentioned, right? So you mentioned immutable infrastructure, right? Immutable ways of doing patching and operations. The backups are so crucial, right? We should be able to have an automated way to make sure that we can recover fastest. That the fast recovery capability of the cloud is also a tremendous value add for the industry. And then finally, I would say the security analytics bit, right? There's only so much analytics that we can do on-prem, right? There's only so much signaling. There's only so much processing capacity. If we don't bring that information up into the cloud to perform those analytics, I think we're going to be missing a tremendous risk reduction opportunity. And I hope that the standards drafting team looks really strongly into the need for those security analytics and then enables mechanisms where utilities can take that security decision-making, that security analytic, and the security monitoring and bringing it to a place which is infused with intelligence and signaling from many sources.
Yeah, I love how you put, put things in the context of the trade-offs, because everything has the trade-offs. You have to understand what you have, what you need, and what the trade-offs are of the solutions. And even, from a regulatory perspective, those requirements should set the bar for best practices and really help entities understand how to manage those trade-offs, rather than put, blanket prohibitions or anything like that in place, because the technology and use cases and the risks continue to evolve. So you already said it, Mikhail, but the resources need to be nimble.
Correct.
I can't believe this hour has gone so fast. We're almost out of time. I do have one question I'd like to ask for anybody. Lou, turn your camera back on too, please, because, I keep thinking as we talk about this, there's a standards authorization request that was submitted to NERC. I believe, Maggie, you were a part of that resulted in a brand new drafting team. Is there anything at all you can think of to tell our registered entities to help prepare for some of the things that might be coming out of the drafting team? Or is it too early? Do we know anything enough about the proposals to help prepare our folks? Maggie, we'll start with you.
Sure. I don't think it's too early. There's I think by virtue of the SAR being accepted and the drafting team being formed, it's already increased the amount of conversation and the exploration of even the challenging those assumptions. I think folks are exploring it. So I encourage people to continue to do that. Learn about cloud. I mean, there is a lot of training and resources available at no charge to really get more hands-on experience with it, to understand it. I know it's Halloween today, but it's not scary. Dive in and learn what you can about it. And because I will say, over the recent years in these conversations, I've seen the level of sophistication in the questions really go up. Keep going up. Keep going up. That's going to inform how the language, how we frame the language, and how the language comes out. How it'll inform how you vote and comment on the language. And to inform yourself, also be sure to talk with your other folks cross team. I know, a lot of times there is a compliance lead that ends up being the interface, or can be a compliance lead that ends up as the interface for comments and voting and such. This is the opportunity for really cross-functional input. You've got your security people, you've got your business operations people, you've got your IT people who are already experiencing a lot with cloud deployments. You probably have digital infrastructure people in your team. It's the opportunity to really bridge those communications and gather input.
Mikhail, anything to add?
So I'm actually going to build on that last comment from Maggie. The cross-functional collaboration is crucial, right? It's also not scary. And the interesting thing that I think some of the IT security professionals and practitioners will see is that the OT users and the OT parts of the business are actually going to be coming to the IT folks to say, hey, I actually want to use cloud for stuff. And because there are specific technology solutions that are existing now and that are coming out specifically to target their needs, again, for the grid of the future mindset. And at the same time, I really don't want people to be afraid of regulators. Regulators are friendly, okay? And the actual, if you were to say, what should I as an entity do to prepare for what's coming? The main thing is, apart from what Maggie mentioned in terms of learning about cloud, go participate, have a voice, right? From personal experience, even if you're not on a drafting team, your voice counts. So if you're not there, that means that you're literally transferring the risk for someone else to solve the problem for you. If you have a thought, if you have an idea, go and participate. I like, that's my call to action. It is only through participation and through constructive, let's call it constructive arguments, maybe, will we get to the best solutions possible.
And you're right about that. And I understand the fear. Lou and I used to be colleagues many years ago. We worked for registered entities. Then Lou made the leap first to a region. He became my first CIP auditor. Then I got to be afraid of Lou. I used to like Lou. Then we had to be afraid of Lou showing up at our shop, and it was a change. Today,
and when I did show up, Chris, what happened?
I don't want to even say. So we did okay, I think, if I remember right.
You did very well, yes.
Right. So we do have auditors on the CTAG with us. So we have assist teams like me and outreach teams. And Lou, you can reach out to and ask questions for. It's a different world with the regions today. Lou, you're ground zero on the drafting team. Anything to add to what these two said?
Not really. They said it all.
Good advice then, right?
Participate, and learn as much as you can about this whole subject. It's a vast, complex subject. Learn as much as you can, and then share what you've learned.
I'll go to the next slide, Lou. I want to leave people with the ways to get involved. Pay attention to the drafting teams. You can find that information on the NERC website. Next slide, Lou. This series of webinars has been recorded. So if you're interested, you can jump back and look at the first 3 webinars and take a review of those. Feel free to provide some feedback or reach out to anybody on the CTAG. I want to say thanks to all of you. I mean, we're so lucky to have folks like Maggie and Mikhail, who, sorry, you each have 1 foot planted in industry. Sorry, I know you work for Amazon and Microsoft, but you still each have a foot and a hand directly tied into our industry. And we really appreciate you folks staying involved and helping us through this transition. It is scary. Sorry, Maggie. It's Halloween, and it is a little scary for a lot of us. But and Lou, thanks for your support and everything you've done with the CTAG and these webinars. So I guess the last thing I can say is stay involved. Happy Halloween, everybody. Enjoy the kids tonight. Your ghost host signing us off. We'll see you next time.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.